We're here at the Chase Gallery in the Nova Scotia Archives. And joining me today is mind-bending artist, Brandt Eisner. Welcome to Gallery 902.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited that you've set up this display for us. Right now, currently, we're inside your show that you've set up, a group effort, I Am Who I Am. But these are special pieces of yours from your personal collection that you've brought in to share with us today. Just give us a little bit of history on that.
I think my art practice is multifaceted. I have, my more, I don't know if traditional is the right word, but, gallery pieces that I show, and then I have
things that people might expect to see on a wall.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
But then you have...
And then I have costuming and wearable art for drag performance and just performance art in general. So yeah, it's kind of gone in different directions. I like to do a lot of different things.
And you do some sculpting pieces as well,
yeah,
that you build upon.
A lot of sculptural work, and I think a lot of the costuming, I think of it as sculptural, whether it's on the body or displayed. And the whole sort of displaying is just, new in the last few years. Drag really wasn't part of my art practice. It was more so just something I did on the side. But, it always got a lot of attention. And at some point it was like, okay, what if we took this into the traditional gallery space and create a very different experience, and that you're looking at specific pieces, but it also feels like an installation that you get to walk around and experience and walk around, the pieces and get close. And then accompanying that was, photography. So it sort of brought a whole nother element of, portraying characters. Because I think, really that's what my drag is about, is characters, maybe a bit more theatrical. I don't necessarily want I don't want to feel like it's Brandt on stage. And that's how it used to be, which makes it very nerve-wracking when it's like, oh, I'm up here doing this. It's weird. But as soon as you're like, I'm not, oh, this is somebody else.
Like you needed to give up to that.
Yeah,
like
I needed to. And it took a long time to sort of figure that out. But then once you do, it becomes a lot, I don't know if easier, but it becomes more natural. So you have I have a very clear sort of understanding or vision of who this individual is. So how do they act and behave under any circumstance? So it makes it easier that, there's been times I've fallen off stage. Nobody even really noticed because it was just part of the show because I was in character the whole time, and just, treated it as such. So it's that thing where people only know you make a mistake if you make it clear you've made a mistake.
Talk to us a little bit about where you grew up. Take us back to 11-year-old Brandt.
I grew up in a small town on the South Shore, and in a very religious family and community. So it was a challenging, to say the least, experience existing in that space when you are obviously do not fit anywheres, and try pretty hard to fit, but it's just not possible.
And being in a small town, there aren't a lot of outlets to find what your thing was, or where do you?
No, and especially, I think things change. Things are maybe a little easier for people with, social media and, growing up, we had 2 television stations. There wasn't access to the world in that way. To find a connection. Yeah, so you were very sheltered. I was fortunate in that, in my family, there was definitely an element of craft, from woodworking to sewing and various things. But they were, what most people would maybe consider low craft. Traditional, but not...
But for functionality.
Functionality, right. More so. and which has such an important place.
And that's your base. You need
and that's
that.
the base, you know.
Yeah.
But it's been just, you know, very devalued. And yet you find that craft, which has emerged into fine craft. I like to use the word fine craft.
Absolutely.
Because it really does fall into more and more crossing the lines of fine art and fine craft. And what do those two things look like, and what are the definitions of those things, and how are they changing, and how should they have changed 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago? But how the societal, you know, ideas around what was valued, what was not valued.
Isn't that true?
You know, it sticks with us for a long time. And so you have, you know, craft was a woman's work. You know, a man didn't do craft.
The association.
You know,
yes.
and so there was taboos around what was appropriate for somebody to create. So I think, there wasn't a lot of understanding of how craft could go beyond the craft show market. But there were a couple fine artists in the community that happened to be friends of the family. And although I think there was a lack of maybe fully understanding what that was, we knew that, you know, they made beautiful work and had, you know, gone to art school.
Was there pottery? Like, what kind of items?
It was actually painting, like mostly, like earlier, like my earliest, you know, was more watercolor painting and work in pen and ink. That was, I would say, my first sort of exposure to what we'd maybe consider fine art.
Okay.
But it didn't connect with me so much in that, you know, I couldn't do that. That's not what I had a skill set for. I never really saw myself as being creative or artistic. You know, I wasn't a colorer, or I didn't like to make things out of paper. Like, it wasn't something.
You don't have those beginning stories of that?
No. And I think it's because I have, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist, but I would say that I like things done a certain way.
Yes.
But, you know, like, you're told what's good and what's not good, right? So for me, I just wasn't good at doing those traditional artsy craftsy things.
Brandt, this is my favorite part of the show, where I've asked every artist to bring something that is really inspirational to them, or set them on a different path maybe in their journey, or something that, of course, they'll never get rid of. It's a keeper item. So share with us what your item is you brought today.
Okay. So I brought a hooked rug, which doesn't seem like it relates, but it totally does. I think because, you know, most of my strongest connections were always women. And a lot of surrounded by craft on various levels, which I never really thought of as being, you know, important. But with time, especially I think, you know, when I was at NASCAD, the value in craft just became more and more evident to me, and how it related to my practice as an artist. And especially as soon as you do make that connection with, oh, craft is not a masculine, you know, thing to do. But I was drawn to textiles.
Did that change for you, that you no longer had that interpretation any longer?
I think so. I think it just like became very clear that, oh, this is a huge part and hugely important to what I do. And so my grandmother, my mom's mom, she did hooked rugs, but I never really got to know her. She died very young. So you only know that, you know, and so Mom had her hooked rugs. And, you know, I think at the time, it was, you know, you didn't hang on to things, especially old things. So you just sold stuff off to get rid of it. And so my parents sold all her hooked rugs to an antique dealer who, you know, paid them nothing. And I was very upset about it. And later on, Mom came to really regret it. So for some reason, I had this thing with hooked rugs. And I think I love craft that is functional and decorative. But like I said, craft has become and textiles, obviously, a huge part of what I do. And it has been included in everything, you know, from stretching textiles over a canvas to work on top of, to, you know, making clothing or, you know, weaving or whatever. And at NASCAD, I had Dr. Sandra Appleby, who was like, you know, she is the goddess. She was a force in the craft community, and also the most amazing person you would ever meet. And her and I just like bonded, like most people did with her. She unfortunately passed a few years ago, quite young, from cancer, which was, you know, very traumatizing for a lot of us, because she just felt like
she had so much more to give.
So much to give, and had done so much already. Yes. But, you know, I think, you know, when you start taking all that craft history, just like it has the same weight and importance as art history.
Yes.
And
agreed.
It's, you know, we spent so much time dividing the two that we forgot how much the craft inspired the fine. You know, you had painters who were inspired by textiles. You had the whole, you know, arts and crafts movement.
That's right.
That really informed, you know, art in a lot of ways. And music and dance.
The fusion.
It's, you know, and I think we still struggle with that a bit, but, you know, I think if you look in a fine art magazine, you know, most people who fall into the fine art, especially if they're installation artists or what, it's mixed media, and they're pulling in elements of craft. So, so yeah, I think craft is a huge part of my practice, and has become almost like one of the most important. That, yes, I'm a man who plays with textiles and beading, and, you know.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, and, you know, it's, but we've seen the shift, you know, I mean, there's, you know, the amount of men knitting.
Knitting, yes.
I mean, that would have been unheard of.
Quilting.
Quilting, and, you know, just, you know, doing phenomenal textiles.
I think you know Laura Kenny. Amazing.
Amazing.
Rug hooker.
One of my, like, she's amazing.
Incredible. We had her on the show.
Yeah.
And she taught us all about hooking.
Yeah.
And so how did this beautiful rug come to be in your possession if they were all taken?
Yeah, I started sort of like when I could and when I could afford, you know, buy when I could or can. And this, along with there's 2, 3 others, I got in 2 auctions, but in the same, like both auctions were in Truro. And I got the first few, which were obviously just design and technique done by the same person. And then another auction, and there was another one, and I was like, this is all one person's work. And so I was able to, you know, get them. And they were, you know, they're in pretty great condition for being, I mean, I use them. These aren't on walls, like, they were meant to be used.
But this shows the quality.
Yeah.
The longevity of it.
Yeah, I mean, these will last forever when properly taken care of.
Yes. And just the colors.
The color, and you forget about the design and the pattern, and, you know, a lot of people used, and some still do use, you know,
but they were
pre-made, you know, patterns. Like I have a book from the, I don't know, super antique, that's a book of designs for rug hooking. And so you still get that, but then you have the Laura Kennys,
yes,
who
said,
don't rely, why do we have to follow these rules?
Yes.
You know, we can create our own vision and tell a story. And so, you know, I always, like, whenever she calls herself a folk artist, I cringe a little bit, because I'm like, it's so much more. It's so much more.
I agree with you.
The conceptual and the social political, and each piece has a lot to say. And sure, they're beautiful and fun and quirky, but there's that underlying thing that has a lot to say. And I think we're seeing more of that happening.
Yes.
Both conceptual rug hooking, but also traditional rug hooking where people are starting to feel more comfortable, you know, to let's create my own pattern.
That's right.
But I love the traditional patterns too.
And I'm glad that it spoke to you, because it really, we can see it. So Brandt, here we are, Chase Gallery, exciting part of the show where we are surrounded by your showcase pieces. These are truly labors of love. And I would love to start with this piece here because it really speaks to me. I'll tell you my interpretation after.
All right. I think too, it has layers. Like I hope that, you know, the work has layers. And so, yeah, originally this had a different title, which I don't even remember now. And then all of a sudden I became aware that the title had to be The Cleaner.
It just came to you?
It just, yeah, because I was like, oh, I think, you know, for personally, I feel like I've done a lot of that or do a lot of that for, you know, people on a maybe emotional level. But also like, you know, cleaning up the messes that other people have created in your life or,
yes.
But then also, you know, I think to take an object like a vacuum cleaner, which is,
that we look at every day.
That we see every day, that's usually considered a certain role for, you know, for so long and still somewhat for women. You know, so it was kind of like, you know, also glamorizing the, you know, the mundane, but then adding the twist of, you know, the red symbolizing blood.
Yes, the linoleum is...
The antique linoleum, which, you know, came out of an abandoned house, so speaks to history and history of the home and also history of, you know, interior design or design in general. So, yeah, sometimes I don't fully understand the piece myself until somebody else, you know, it keeps growing,
evolving.
And with the more people who see it and interpret it in various ways.
You really did put modern with the past as well. I really love that so much. For me, watching all of those old movies, it's really truly that old 1950s with the martini in one hand and keeping yourself composed even though something obviously traumatic has just happened. But it's okay because a martini and some lipstick will fix that right up.
That's right.
That truly was, you know, the mentality, of course.
And some people just like that it's a sparkly thing.
Absolutely, they're drawn to it.
They're drawn to it, And it's great, it pulls people in, you know. Kids tend to love my work because it's just weird enough.
It's so
and
tactile.
And, you know, it's got, you know, shine and, you know, not everything, but I do tend to use rhinestones a fair amount and sequin, but so yeah.
I love that. Let's move over to this because this is a collaborative piece.
It is.
Which I think for not a lot of artists, this is something that maybe they'd be comfortable to do.
I love doing collaboration. I've done quite a few collaborations and almost always with people who work in different mediums than myself. But it takes, you know, it has to be the right chemistry.
Definitely.
And egos have to be set aside for the betterment of the final piece.
Had you worked with this artist before?
I had not. Louise Pence, she approached me, and for me and a lot of other people, she's a big deal. Like, she's a big deal. She would not consider herself that at all. But she's made, I think, a real impact in the Nova Scotia art community, starting as a potter and moving into a lot of other mediums. And so she started this project called the Blanket Project, where she was using blankets to talk about social issues and, you know, what's damaged, what can be fixed, and, you know, or how do we think about, you know, repair or whatever. And so she came to me and was like, I want to do, something that speaks to, the male queer experience. And I don't know what that means, but let's just figure something out.
Take us up here now.
Okay.
And explain, where did this idea start?
Often my ideas come from, I don't know where they come from. They just show up randomly.
For you, is there ever something comes in a dream?
I don't have the dream stuff, but often, leading up to sleep, I often say that I'm in the in-between place where I think I'm awake, but then I find out that I'm actually sleeping. I'm often told to stop snoring, and I'm like, I'm not snoring, I'm awake.
But you're actually...
But yeah, so in those, and driving, actually,
okay.
A lot sort of shows up. But
now, from seeing things, or more just because your mind is
just,
able to sort of shut off a
just
bit?
Just focus. Like, my mind, I do not shut off.
I was going to say, you are go, go, go.
Nonstop. It's exhausting.
So driving makes sense.
Driving sort of, it's a quieter time. But yeah, often, sometimes I do see something, and it just I immediately know what I'm going to do with it.
Okay. So how did this come?
I don't even know. A few years ago, I started weaving. Like, I did weaving at NASCAD, but then I started wanting to weave like weird materials. And so the measuring tapes really speak to my own experience with, sort of that, family of, woodworkers and the expectations. Meanwhile, I had other interests. So this sort of speaks to the craft of weaving, but also sort of the pressure to go into a more masculine job, and then using the dressmaker's tapes to sort of, speak to the more feminine. So it's kind of like always, most of my work has a lot to do with gender roles and how we define them for ourselves and how others dump that on us.
I love the title on this one.
Blue Boy?
Yes.
Yeah. Often, like, when ideas come, like I said, they come fully, and I obsess about, working it all out before going to... this was something that was part of a show where I had one of those, I had a deadline, and I didn't have any concept. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Nothing was coming, and I just started experimenting and playing. I tend to try to rely a lot on Warhol's, don't think about it, just keep making, don't worry if it's good or bad, just do it, and other people can decide if it's good or bad, but really it doesn't matter, you just make. And that's been really important, because I'm often like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like, I don't know if it's,
and I feel like
what's the point of this, and I'm very critical.
Yes.
So I need to remind myself of that, it's the journey, and not every piece is,
it's just art.
It's part of the process.
That's right.
And, I'm a firm believer in when you realize that something isn't fully, that you don't want to put out into the world again, that you destroy it. And sometimes it takes a while to separate yourself from the piece, not see it for a long time, come back with fresh eyes, and then decide, is this done? Is it worth being out there?
That's a tough call.
Does it represent what I want people to see? Like, when I'm dead, is this something I want floating around in the world?
Those are heavy questions.
So it's, I think that's one of the benefits of art school, is you learn critical thinking.
And you have to learn to let go of things, because I hear from a lot of artists that sometimes they just hang on to everything.
Or I don't want to put a price on this because it's my favorite piece. I've never understood that. It's like, I would hope that the more one does, the better they get. So I'm not hung up on keeping things, or, if somebody wants to buy something, by all means, like, that is a huge compliment.
Huge,
but,
yes.
that is not, I just have to make. And without making, I would go crazy. Like, I think, there's a lot of artists that is their outlet.
100%.
It's a form of therapy. It's a form of being able to speak about difficult things that words don't quite cover. Yeah.